All right, looks like it's 2 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to welcome everyone to the virtual boot camp series. This is session 7 today, and we'll be covering how to interview successfully. I'm Mike Stump. I'm a career coach at the Easton Center, and before I joined the great team that we have at the Easton Center, I spent most of my career as a human resources professional. So during that time, I've literally interviewed thousands of applicants. In fact, I wish I knew exactly how many I've interviewed. It would be interesting to know that. But what I hope to do today is take that experience that I have and share some of that with you, particularly from the employer side of things, and share some perspective there. So let's, as we get started, I want to share some housekeeping items with you. Okay. If you would, please mute your microphone and do not use your video during the session. That'll help with the quality. We will be recording the session and it will be posted to our website within, I think, at the conclusion of our training. So you'll have opportunity to ask questions. You may do so at any point during the presentation, or at the end we'll have time as well. Just unmute your microphone, or you can click chat located on the Zoom toolbar, type in your question, and someone will cue me to that, and we'll read that aloud and answer it. Okay, so let's run through real quickly what we hope to learn today. One of the things I wanted to do is share and provide an understanding of the interview process from your perspective. A lot of what we do in the Easton Center is educating you about the employer and what to expect from them. And so I want to spend a little bit of time touching on some things from your perspective, from an employer's perspective. So next, we'll talk about how to answer a couple of commonly and frequently asked questions, which are the tell me about yourself question and the strengths and weakness questions that are typically asked, and how you can deliver a quality response to those. Then we'll spend a bulk of the time going through the behavior-based interviewing. This may be a review for some of you, and it may be new for some of you as well, depending on which of the BADM classes that you've taken, but should be helpful either way. And then talking about the STAR method, which is really the approach to take when answering those questions to deliver a quality response. And then finally, we'll wrap up with the interview prep sheet. By the time we get through this, I will have mentioned that several times. It's just a neat tool that we have. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then Q&A at the end. All right, so before we jump into the presentation, each of these sessions, we've talked about which of the SPEARS competencies really you need to utilize for whatever the session is that we're discussing. And in this case, with interviewing, those three are communicating effectively, instilling trust, and persuades. And I really cannot think of the bookend competencies here could not be any less important here than they are, because what you're doing in an interview is when you're communicating, you're conveying a clear message about who you are and what you can do to the recruiter or to the hiring manager. With respect to instilling trust, you know, every day we go about our lives and we gain and lose the trust of people around us based on our actions. And so in the interview context, we have a very short period of time to spend with the person that we're trying to gain their confidence in us and gain their trust that, hey, this person would be a great hire for us to bring into our company. So it's very important. And you get that by consistency in your answers and being transparent. And then persuades. This is really, communicates and persuades are akin to each other, or cousins, as you would say, because you have to be able to communicate effectively to be able to persuade, but they do go together. And so when you're persuading in an interview setting, you are using compelling stories about yourself to convince the recruiter that you are the best fit for this job. And so, interesting mix of competencies for this session, I think, and we'll talk more about those as we go through. So, as I mentioned, we wanted to talk about the interview from your perspective. And so, uh, I make a correlation here that interviewing is a learned skill, and it's very, very similar to your academic studies, meaning that the more effort that you put into the preparation, the better result that you're going to get in that situation. Well, interviewing is really not that different. Better preparation equals a better outcome, and it starts with having a in-depth understanding of what the job posting is. And I think a mistake that's made here is that you see the job posting, you get excited because it's something or a company or a place that you're interested in, and you apply. And then the next thing you know, somebody's calling you to set up a phone screen or something, and you really haven't looked at the job posting and dug down into it, the detail of it, of what's required, what competencies are required, what skills are required. And at that point, it may be too late. So what I would tell you is that when you apply, be prepared for that. Look at the job posting, see what the job requirements are, compare those to your qualifications. This is an opportunity for you to maximize your sharing your successes and correlate what strengths you have to the job. And one of the phrases that we use here is you're connecting the dots for the interviewer. You're helping them to see why you're the best candidate for the job. So there comes that persuasion competency that we talk about. And so this last bullet this is something that's really, I guess, personal and passionate for me. As I mentioned, I was an HR professional. So when I was interviewing people, particularly people to come on my team, one of the things I told them is that the interview process is a two-way street. You know, our decision or our responsibility is to determine if you're a good fit, if you can do the job. Your responsibility is to make sure that this is the right job, this is the right team for me to work on, and that this is the right company for me to come to work for. And so, although this is maybe minimized a little bit right now, given our current situation, it will very quickly, once again, be important if you have multiple interviews and multiple offers, you may have decisions to make, and that should be considered as you go to make those decisions, because if you're aligned on all those things, odds are you're going to have a great career with that company for however long you choose to do so. So great. Hopefully that helps you a little bit there from looking at it from your perspective. Now we're going to talk a little bit about those common questions, and starting with the tell me about yourself question. And what we want to do here is share a little bit of guidance that we put together to help you answer these questions better. And so starting with tell me about yourself, this is a question that's typically asked at the beginning of the interview. And the reason it's asked at the beginning of the interview is for two reasons. One is it's a warm-up question. It's a question that's asked to put you at ease, to get some confidence when you answer this question, because pretty much anybody can tell you about yourself. So it's a layup question, and that's why it's there. But the other reason it's asked is it's an unstructured question, and employers like to ask it because they're curious to see what you'll share about yourself that they don't already know. And so it's a fantastic opportunity to prepare and deliver a response that's memorable. Odds are you're going to get asked this question, and it's not going to change. It's one of the great things. You might interview with a company and have 2 or 3 interviews by the time you're done. And trust me, a lot of the other questions are going to vary from interview to interview, but this is going to be the same. So you can prepare for it. And it does allow an opportunity for you to separate yourself from other candidates. And I'll tell you why in just a second. But it also allows you to set a positive tone for the interviewer. And right here, I'm going to share a secret with you that in my experience, and this is me personally, when I asked this question and they answered it in a way that was something unique about them, that was memorable, something that was relatable to the job that I was considering them for, trust me, that person stood out and stuck with me out of the vast pool of people that you have to consider. So it's a great opportunity. And so what I would say is that a lot of people, and I would say it's kind of the 80-20 rule, that probably about 80% of the people, when asked this question, will answer with a bio of themselves. They'll start to regurgitate facts. Hi, I'm Mike Stump. I'm, from Enid, Oklahoma. I went to Oklahoma State. I graduated with a business management degree in human resources management, on and on. And those are all things that are true, but they're also things that the interviewer probably already knows about you, and that's not really what they're looking for. So great opportunity to do something different here. And this is what that's why we've created a guide, a one-page guide to help you walk through, ask yourself some questions to produce some answers, which you in turn can turn into a story to tell about yourself, which will be memorable and will separate you from the rest of the herd, so to speak. So let's just step through those questions. What are you passionate about? What excites you? That's an easy question. We all have something like that. So find what that is for you, and then think about what examples of how that passion has contributed to your success thus far in life, or your experiences or your accomplishments. And then from there, you want to take the highlights of those experiences and basically correlate that to the profession that you're striving to achieve, or the job, or the company, or the whatever mission it is that you have, because that's what's going to resonate with the employer. When they hear that, they're going to be able to connect that. Not only does it make you stand out amongst the other applicants, but it very much so can, tie you to elements of the job that they can relate to because they've done the job or they're managing people that are in the job. So just a fantastic opportunity here. So encourage you to look at that guide at some point. The other question is the strength and weakness question. And again, these are other questions that are easy to ask, but sometimes there's a missed opportunity here. And that's really what I want to talk about today. I think everybody's pretty good at coming up with what their strengths are, and maybe a little bit harder on the weakness. But when you think of these, again, it's an opportunity to prepare ahead of time, because when you get asked this question, it's really not going to change. What might change is what strengths you share, because you've looked at the job posting and you know that maybe one or two of your strengths are key items that are listed in that job posting for that position to be successful. So you for sure want to share those. And so you want to have a list of at least 3, but you might have more than that if you can, maybe 5, because you may juggle which one of those you want to answer with depending on the job that you're interviewing for. So as you go to define what those strengths are, you can use the interview prep sheet, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But one of the suggestions that I have is you can utilize the Spears competencies that we have, that you've learned about. Those are listed in our resume guide, right in the front part of that. And what I would tell you is that the reason I say that is that if communicating effectively, or customer focus, or self-awareness, or whatever your strengths are, if you use different terminology to describe those, you may not connect the dots for the interviewer. And the reason I say that is that those companies that you're interviewing for, the vast majority of them use competencies in their workplace. They use them to hire, they use them to evaluate, they use them to develop people. And so if you speak and use those terminologies when you're sharing your strengths, they're going to be able to relate to those, especially if those are competencies that are listed in that job posting. So start there as a suggestion. Make sure you align them to the job posting, as I just said, and then tell the story. And here's another big hint that I would share with you. As we do mock interviews, and I've done other interviews, what happens is that when we ask this question of applicants and we ask them to tell us what their strength is and tell us why it's been successful, a lot of times in their answer they get lost and forget to share the success that they've had, how it made them successful, how it contributed to their accomplishments. And that is as important, if not more important, than telling them what the strength is. Don't make the mistake of stating the strength and then giving some generic definition about it, because they understand they don't need a definition of what communicates effectively is. They know what it is. What you want to do is tell them the great things and the successes that you've been able to do because you're great at building teams or whatever your strength is. Okay, so very important there. And then moving to the weakness part of that question, again, you want to have at least 3 weaknesses that you've listed there and you've thought through what they are. When you pick these, it's a little bit harder, right? You know, everybody knows what their strengths are. But sometimes we have a tendency to not be genuine, or maybe pick a weakness that we've heard other people say, and you don't really want to do that. Don't fall into the trap of saying I'm a perfectionist or something like that, because in reality that's not much of a weakness, period. So you won't come across as sincere, I don't think. So be sincere, ask for help if you're not sure what yours are. Think of people around you, that your fellow students, maybe roommates, your parents, I'm sure can help you with that. Anybody like that can give you that feedback. And then you start with, once you've defined those, is then you start to think about, okay, how did I become aware of that? It's good for you to be able to share that in the interview too. That will impress the interviewer. And then you want to talk about how you're overcoming them or how you overcame them. My belief is that if you have a weakness, a lot of those are hard to totally overcome. So in a lot of instances, you're really managing them so that they don't become an issue for you. So what you want to do here is, if you're asked to share a weakness, share one. Now, if they ask you for 3, then you'll need to share 3. But, you know, I would just share one if you're just asked for a weakness. I mean, think about it. When you're on a first date, you don't reel off all of your faults, do you, on the date? You know, obviously that's not going to get you a second date. So think about that from that perspective. And then again, this is where you want to think about the job posting. And if there's a critical element in the job posting that is one of your weaknesses and you have the opportunity, you might want to steer away from sharing that one, share another one. So, and then finally, one way to identify a unique strength of yours is, if you're struggling at all to find those, is to go to your Clifton Strengths assessment results. And for those of you that have been in the BATM 3111 class, you'll have those. So let me talk a little bit about how you get to those if you've forgotten. You go basically to the login, or you can use the link that's right here that'll be in this presentation. You can access your results there. It'll pull up your page. And the site has a lot of great information in there, not only to give you more detail about what your strengths are and help you to be able to speak to those, but there's a lot of resources in there on that page that you can then access to use to really develop and impact your performance by maximizing those strengths, so to speak. And if you've not taken the Clifton Strengths assessment and you would like to do so, you can do that by calling one of the career coaches here, or making an appointment or whatever, shooting us an email, and we can request that on your behalf. And the cost to you is $15, which is really pretty minimal for what you get out of it. Okay, so now let's move on and let's get into the bulk of the behavior-based interviewing part of this presentation. Behavior-based interviewing, or BBI, I'm going to shorten it for my benefit, is basically typically relating the skills and the competencies that are desired for the jobs. And that's heavy emphasis usually on the competencies. So a BBI interview is going to ask you questions about how you've behaved in the past to demonstrate the skills that you need for the position in the future. So it's based on the premise past behavior is a predictor of future behavior. That's really kind of where it evolved from. And so what BBI questions don't ask is, what would you do? Would being the key word there. They ask, what did you do? And there's a big difference there. So sometimes people fall into the trap of they can't really think of an example and they start to hypothesize. Well, yeah, if that happened or when that happens, I might do this, or I always do this, or whatever. And what they want is an actual specific example in your past. And so you want to be careful to do that. If you go down that path, a good interviewer will reel you back in by asking follow-up questions, but some people don't. And if they don't ask that, that's going to work against you. So you want to make sure you're answering those questions as I described. And then another little hint is a lot of times interviewers will tell you, hey, we're going to be asking behavior-based questions. You know, we want you to reflect back. They give you, that's what good interviewers do. That's what good processes do, but not everybody does that. And so the way to recognize those BBI questions is that they start with, tell me about a time, think of a situation when, describe a time when, things like that, okay? So when you hear those first few words in the question, that's your trigger to know that it is a behavior-based question. And then you'll want to, go into the thinking mode where, okay, I need to respond using the STAR method, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So the STAR method, many of you may have learned about this again in the BATM classes. If so, this will be a refresher, and if not, it's good information for you. And so what this is kind of a screenshot, again, of a one-page guide that we have that's on our website that helps you. This is a good thing to look at if you haven't had many behavior-based interviews and you're going to be going for your first one of those. I would definitely encourage you to kind of read back through and kind of drill yourself on this. And so what we've done here is this provides some guidance as to each of the letters in that STAR acronym. And then I'm going to walk you through this actual interview question. And this is an actual example that we pieced together from what an applicant's answer would be to that question. So starting with the S is the situation. Again, reflecting back on a situation that's occurred where you're setting the scenario for what the example is that the rest of the story is going to flow from. Then the task follows that. So, I had this situation where I was going to be short-staffed, where two of my people were going to be out for a period of time. My task was, because of our manning, that we had to be able to make some changes in how the work was distributed in order for us to be successful for those several weeks. And then the action gets into talking about the specific actions that you did when faced with that situation. I'll give you an example of that later. And then the result. The result is very important. So one of the things I'd like to say real quickly before we walk through the example of this is that as you respond to this question or these questions, your response should kind of look like a bell graph, okay? The situation and the task should be about 25 to 30% of your answer. The action should be about 40 to 50, and then the result should be like another 20 to 25, okay? And don't check my math there because it may not be 100. But my point is that you want to spend your time on the action because that's really what the interviewer is interested about. You need to give them just enough context so that they understand what you're talking about, but they really could care less about the situation. They really are interested in knowing how you respond, what action you take when you're faced with a situation where you're managing complexity or you're dealing with a difficult conversation that you have to have with someone. So that's going to correlate into the workplace. Okay, so now let me walk you through this question. Tell me about a time when you had to provide difficult feedback to a team member, okay? So this is something that most of you should be able to come up with. You know, you think of all the group projects that you're on or the organizations that you're in, inevitably there's a situation where you have to do this. And so in this example that we've provided, this individual was in a marketing class and they had a group project to examine customer motivation. So they were assigned to a group of 4, and they decided to look at what would motivate a customer to shift their brand allegiance. And so then the group, like all groups do, got together, developed a plan, divided the work up amongst, and then went off to do that work. And then after a week or two, they quickly realized that, hey, one of our team members is really not participating. They weren't completing their assignments. They maybe weren't calling in, zooming in for the calls to talk about it. And so that was of concern to the group, and the group realized that, hey, we've got to do something to re-engage them. And so then moving to the action, and this is important because remember, there's a group here, and this person who's answering this question said they took the initiative to schedule a meeting with him where they discussed, he discussed the interest of the project as well as what was going on with that person. You know, what responsibilities did they have? You know, he wanted to get an understanding of, you know, what was causing this person to not engage with the group and not do the work. And so by having that conversation and talking through it, they learned more about this person and why they weren't contributing. And then at that point, the person goes back to the group and talked and gave them that feedback. And as a team, this person was able to influence the group to say, okay, hey, let's make some slight changes. Maybe we tweak the assignments so that this person is doing something that they're more interested in, or maybe they feel more comfortable doing. And in doing so, they ended up with a good outcome. And that result is that good outcome, and that's validated from a grade or feedback that they got from their professor or whatever. So there you go. We've filled those 4 buckets. But before I stop there, I want to highlight the example that's included at the end of this, because as you're wrapping up the result, there's also an opportunity here for you to share kind of the takeaways or the learning experiences that you had from being in this situation. And so let me speak through the verbiage that's here so I can highlight that for you. This experience taught me the importance of addressing concerns early and taking a collaborative approach and capitalizing on the strengths of other team members. And so let me put my employer hat back on now. Oh my gosh, you know, would that make an impression on me if I'm interviewing this person and they kind of shared that last little bit with me? Hopefully, if I'm a good interviewer, I can glean that from reading between the lines on what they did. But if I'm inexperienced or I'm new or I'm not great at behavioral interviewing or whatever, if I call that out as an applicant and share that with the person, it's validated in there by what my actions were. And I cannot tell you how much that correlates directly to the job that you're doing. Those skills that that person highlighted at the end there are absolutely critical in the workplace, and you'll learn to figure that out as you go into your roles. So hopefully that helps you there. The last little home stretch now, the interview prep guide. Again, we talked a lot about that. Savannah did a great job yesterday covering this, so I don't want to spend a bunch of time on it. I want to touch on really the competency piece of that. And this portion of the guide is there for you to think through your past experiences of each of these competencies, or others. Feel free to add to this too. And then make a brief note that's going to remind you of what that experience is, to jog your memory, so that when you're preparing for the interview, all right, and you're looking at the job posting to see what competencies are critical for this job, and you're going back through and recalling what your stories are, what your experiences are, and you make that little note, then you can actually take this sheet into the interview, have it sitting resting in your portfolio and somebody asks me a difficult question that I haven't, practiced or gotten before, I can glance down because I'll recognize what competency it is if I listen to the question. I can glance at this and I say, oh yeah, okay. And my little note there will tell me, okay, yes, I want to talk about this story. And so very important to use this. I think it's just another tool to help prepare. So I'm going to give you a real quick thing that I alluded to just a minute ago. So if this was my sheet on the juggling multiple priorities, managing complexity, I would have this written on my sheet, LOA, leave of absence, okay? So that reminded me of the situation that I talked about just a minute ago where two of my business partners who supported 1,000 people between them were both out for a period of weeks together. And we were getting by with one of them out. But when the second one came to me and said that she was going to have a baby, which was fantastic for her, it immediately probably scared the heck out of me because I was thinking, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And so then you leap into the mode of that's the situation. The task is that I had to change the way we did some things for that period of time in order for us to be successful. And for me, what that was is I sat down with her. I had her write written work instructions for some of the tasks that I was not familiar with that she did, so that a month from then when it happened, I wouldn't be scrambling, trying to go bother the other business partner and have her do it or ask her to do it for me. So, and another thing I did was we had workflows that had to be processed every day, usually around 50 to 75 of those a week. And so I was going to have to do the majority of those. And the only way for me to be able to do that, because there's only so many hours in the day, was I adjusted my calendar to block time during my lunch hour for 30 minutes to go through and read those every day so that I could keep up with them. And that was giving up my time to make sure that those things got done, because that's pay and transfers and all kinds of other good stuff that people get real fired up about if they don't get pushed through. So that's an example. The result is that by me doing that and taking those actions, we were able to continue to do business, support our customers with really very little interruption there. It wasn't easy, but we got it done. So just an example of how you use that. And then finally, these are some tips, and these have been collected over time. These are nuggets of wisdom from the career coaches here in the Easton Center. And any other time, you would have to pay vast sums of money for us to share these with you. But today, and only today, I'll share these with you for free. So there you go, right? So let's talk about those. Using the STAR method when responding to a question. We just talked about that. It's so important. But when you get asked the question, you want to be able to, if need be, pause a second. Think about, collect yourself. Think about what's a good example. Don't just jump right into it. It's okay. I know that's hard to do because there's that silence. You can take a drink of water. You can glance down at your interview prep guide. How about that? You've got that right there. Maybe you can ask the interviewer to repeat the question. You for sure want to do that if you're not really certain what they're asking for. So those are all ways to do that, to collect yourself a little more time. Make sure you hit all of the STAR elements. We talked about that. Keep your responses brief, 1 to 3 minutes. If you get going longer than that, there's going to be a problem. And your interviewer, good interviewers will tell you that you need to be more concise. And that's not something you want to do, because each interview is budgeted for a limited amount of time. And if your answers go on longer than what they typically are, they won't be able to get through the interview. And that doesn't, bode favorably for you. And then here's the big, I could not emphasize this anymore. Don't forget the action and result. When we do mock interviews, I think the number one mistake that I see students make is they get so caught up in explaining the situation and they give a little bit of the action and then they forget the result altogether. So make sure and go through and practice that, and remember that bell-shaped curve that you're filling up the buckets that are appropriate, because that's where your money is made, in the action and the result. That's what employers want to hear. Good interviewers will continue to probe to get you to tell more about that. But again, you don't want to make it hard on them. You want to make it easy. Tell a story. It's kind of hard because the STAR acronym it's a process that you go through, and so you don't want it to come across as you know, I don't know what the word is, but you want it to flow smoothly. You want it to be a story, paint the picture, walk people through each of those pieces of it, and share that information. Here's another good tip. Responses, I think sometimes people think, oh gosh, I don't have a lot of work experience. How can I answer these questions? Well, it doesn't have to all be about work experience. If you have an internship or you have a great part-time job that's directly related to what you're going to be doing, then fantastic, use that. But if you don't, you've got a bunch of experience that you've had here at school in team class projects, volunteer experience, student organizations, on and on. All of those situations where you're interacting with other people and you have responsibilities, it's not that different than work, okay? Just not getting paid for it. So use some of that to your advantage. Then when possible, highlight your desirable traits, work them into the conversation. It's a great opportunity when you're answering these questions to work in what your strengths are, by mentioning them. I utilized my, communication skills to go and have that conversation, or I've been a leader, in these organizations, and so I volunteered to go talk with Mike about why he wasn't engaged in our project. So just a good opportunity to do that. Focus when you're answering questions that are where the situation is you were part of a group or a team. You want to make sure as you're answering the question that you refer to what you did. This is what I did, okay? If you consistently through your answer say, we did this, we did that, you're going to get asked a follow-up question by the interviewer because they don't want to know what the team did. Because if you were sitting off to the side and really one of the individuals on the team did it, then that's not what you did. They want to know what you did. And so you want to pick those examples where you were out front, you were taking charge, you were, taking the initiative, whatever that be. So be careful about that. That's a trap that people, fall into. And then finally, interviewing is a skill. It is a learned skill. I can promise you from, literally interviewing. I have utilized behavior-based interviewing for 25, 30 years of my career. And so here's what I can tell you. Because I've asked so many questions and I understand and I've trained hundreds of people to how to do this, I can interview pretty well because of that, right? Because I understand it. And because by asking others those questions, it's in effect practicing. So take advantage of the mock interviews that are available to you here with your coaches, and we'd be more than happy to help you. And we'll help you do a custom mock interview. If you can send me the job posting, hey, next Thursday I'm interviewing at XYZ, Mike, you shoot that to me. I'll go through there and look to see what the competencies are, and I'll pick questions that are aligned specifically. And they may be different than some of the questions that you answer in the mock interview that we do here. So great opportunity for you to practice and prepare. So I encourage you to do that. Finally, now I'm going to run through the shameless plugs that we're doing. This is a sheet which shows the guides that I talked about today, which are on our website. And this is the full list. And you can see all of the great resources that we have. People on our team have put in a lot of effort over time to build these things out and make them better. And we're continuously improving them. And what I would tell you is they're great resources for to use. That's why they're there. So take advantage of it. Go to the website. It's in the career services tile. When you open it up, you'll see all of these. So a lot of good information there when you go to write a cover letter or you're trying to set up a LinkedIn profile. It's basically a how-to. And then finally, I want to touch on the remaining sessions that we have next week. So next Tuesday is Should I Pursue a Graduate Degree? Wednesday is How Do I Become More Marketable during my job search? And then finally on Thursday, we're going to have a career coaches panel where we can just do answer questions that you have. So some other good opportunities there. I encourage you to join us again if you would find those helpful. And that takes us to questions at this point. So do you have any questions that I can answer? And I will also stay on the call after we're through if you want to just ask me one-on-one as well. So I have to move my camera here so I can see. Okay, I don't know if I see any questions at this point. So if there aren't any, like I said, I'd be happy to stay on and answer anything. I hope what I shared today is helpful to you. And again, as always, any assistance that you need, just reach out to us, make an appointment through STAR, however you want to do that. We'd be more than happy to help you.
Yeah, Mike, I have a quick question.
Okay.
The question is, since behavioral questions require that the interviewee has to respond to with the behavior they've experienced to be able to answer the question, then what should they do if they truly don't have a life experience that addresses that question?
Okay, that's a good question. Because that may happen, you know, especially if it's a difficult question, maybe something that you've not thought about. I would say probably two things. If I'm asked a question and I, you know, take a moment to think through, look at my guide, I don't really have anything there that I can think of immediately. I would probably ask hey, do you mind if we skip over that question and come back to it later and do that? And then that really does give you a little bit of time, because during the course of the rest of the interview, you may think of something. If that doesn't happen and you get to the end, then, you know, take the initiative. Just, you know, when you get to the interview, say, you know, I've thought about the question that I asked you to kind of wait on, and I really can't think of anything at this point. And rather than make something up, I'd rather just, you know, let you know that I can't think of an experience I've had that falls into that. Is there another question that you would like to ask me along those same lines? And then, you know, leave it at that. And then I think that's better than maybe trying to make something up, because, you know, good interviewers might be able to pick up on that. And, you know, again, that's not going to help you with respect to instilling trust. So, good question. Any other questions that I can answer? Okay. Well, again, thank you for joining us. And again, if there's something next week that you're interested in joining, please register for that. Thank you.